Hey guys, tonight we're rewinding time to the scorching sands of ancient Egypt, where architects didn't just build tombs, they built stone constellations. You're standing at the edge of the Nile's floodplain, sweat trickling down your back as a team of laborers hauls limestone blocks heavier than your last existential crisis. The air smells like dust and ambition. And above you, the stars aren't just pretty dots, they're blueprints. One wrong calculation here, and you'll be buried under a collapsed pyramid faster than you can say cursed mummy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Shout out in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I'm always curious who's falling asleep to ancient astronomy. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It all starts with a name you probably heard. Imhotep. No, not the mummy from the 1999 Brendan Fraser movie. The real guy, the OG architect who looked at a pile of mud brick tombs and said, let's make it geometric. Around 2650 BCE, he designed the step pyramid for Pharaoh Djoser, and suddenly, death had aesthetics. But here's the kicker. While everyone was marveling at the six-tiered wonder, the real magic was happening at night. Priests with titles like Observer of Hours, basically ancient timekeepers with better job security than you, were tracking stars with nothing but palm ribs and patience. Historians still argue whether Imhotep was a genius or just really good at stealing ideas from older, lost civilizations. But one thing's clear. His pyramid wasn't just stacked, it was oriented. The sides align almost perfectly with the cardinal directions, a feat that would make your GPS weep. And they did it without compasses, because magnetism wouldn't be a thing for another few millennia. Instead, they used something called a merkit, a forked stick with a dangling plumb bob that basically turned the night sky into a giant protractor. Now for the quirky tidbit. Those same star-tracking priests also doubled as the ancient equivalent of meteorologists. If Sirius, the Nile star, rose just before sunrise, it meant the annual flood was coming. Get it wrong, and you'd either drown in your sandals or die of thirst. No pressure. And here's the reality check. You'd last about 3 hours in their sandals. The math alone would melt your brain. Imagine trying to calculate stellar declinations while a pharaoh breathes down your neck about his eternal resting place. Oh, and if the pyramid's alignment was off by even a fraction of a degree, let's just say early retirement wasn't an option. You're crouched in the pre-dawn darkness, fingers tracing grooves in a wooden rod while the desert wind hisses through your linen head wrap. This isn't just any stick. It's the ancient world's version of Google Earth, and you're about to cheat the horizon. The tools of Egypt's pyramid architects weren't flashy, but their simplicity was deceptive. That rope stretching between two stakes. It's plotting a line truer than your ex's grudges. Those oddly notched palm ribs. They're recording star positions with precision that would make a Swiss watchmaker nod in respect. Let's talk about the Bay and Nut. The palm rib instrument that sounds like a bad yoga pose, but was actually their secret weapon. Picture this. You hold up a split palm frond, aligning its edges with two stars like a cosmic gunsight. Wait for the moment when both stars kiss the notches simultaneously, and bam, you've just locked in a celestial meridian. Modern archaeologists tried replicating this with 3D printed replicas, and we're off by less than 0.2 degrees. Not bad for technology, older than the concept of democracy. Here's the mainstream historical fact you can drop at parties. The Egyptians didn't just eyeball north, they tracked the circumpolar stars. Unlike our steadfast Polaris, their imperishable stars, those that never set, revolved around an empty spot in the sky near Thuban. That faint dragon's tail star was their true north around 2700 BCE, and aligning to it required observing its extremes over years. One surviving papyrus casually mentions recording a star's position when the inundation came for the third time. Because why use calendars when you can measure time in Nile floods? Now for the fringe bit that'll make academia twitch. Some researchers think the pyramid builders had access to now-lost lenses or reflective crystals. The evidence? A handful of oddly polished quartz fragments found near astronomer priest burials, and the fact that certain corridor angles would have required observing stars invisible to the naked eye. Mainstream Egyptologists scoff, but then again, they also once thought the pyramids were built by slaves. Spoiler, they were paid in beer and bread, and their medical benefits were shockingly good. Historians still argue whether the famous star shafts in the Great Pyramid were ventilation channels, spiritual pathways for the pharaoh's soul, or the world's first astronomical observatories. The southern shaft targets Sirius, while the northern one aligns with Thuban, both at their exact positions circa 2450 BCE. Coincidence? Maybe. But when you realize the pyramid's base perimeter divided by twice its height gives you pi to 3 decimal places, you start wondering if aliens were involved, or just really bore mathematicians. The North Star, Polaris, that steady beacon guiding lost hikers, was just another twinkle in the Egyptian night sky. Their true north was Thuban, a faint star in Draco's constellation that hasn't held the pole position for over 4,000 years. You're squinting at the heavens alongside a leather-skinned astronomer priest, watching as Thuban scribes its lazy circle around the celestial pole. Every 26,000 years, Earth's wobble shifts the pole star title to a new candidate, and the Egyptians were building pyramids right as Thuban's reign was peaking. Here's what blows modern minds. They compensated for stellar drift without knowing the Earth precessed. Imagine trying to build a permanent structure aligned to something that moves 1 degree every 72 years, like trying to hit a bullseye on a rotating dartboard while blindfolded. Yet the Great Pyramid's northern face is only 0.05 degrees off from true north. That's like shooting an arrow from Cairo and hitting the exact pixel of a target in Alexandria. The mainstream fact you'll want to remember: the pyramid builders used a technique called simultaneous transit observation. 2 priests would stand several miles apart, each with a plumb line waiting for a specific star to cross their meridian. When both shouted now, or whatever the ancient Egyptian equivalent was, workers hammered alignment stakes into the desert floor. This created reference lines longer than the pyramids themselves, turning the entire Giza plateau into a giant surveyor's table. Now for the deliciously weird part. Some temple reliefs show priests holding strange L-shaped instruments near their eyes. Conventional archaeology calls them sighting tools, but fringe researchers whisper about lightning rods for cosmic energy. The truth? They might have been the world's first theodolites, angle measuring devices that used water levels to maintain perfect horizontals. One was found buried near the bent pyramid with its cedarwood gears still movable after 46 centuries. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians knew the Earth was round. The math hidden in pyramid dimensions suggests they understood curvature. The Great Pyramid's base perimeter relates to the Earth's polar circumference at a scale of 1:43, 200. Too precise to be coincidence? Probably. But then again, these are the same people who calculated volumes using unit fractions like 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 1/56. Because why make math easy? You're standing at the base of the Great Pyramid, neck craned upward as the desert sun glints off polished limestone casing stones. Each one placed with such precision, you couldn't slide a credit card between them. But your real focus is on the night sky, where 3 stars in Orion's belt hang directly overhead in perfect alignment, just like the 3 pyramids of Giza. This isn't just a poetic coincidence. It's a deliberate architectural echo that's fueled debates for centuries. The Orion correlation theory suggests the entire Giza plateau mirrors the constellation Orion as it appeared in 10,500 BCE, with the Nile representing the Milky Way. Mainstream Egyptologists roll their eyes at the 10,500 BCE date. Pyramids weren't built until 2500 BC, but even they admit the belt star alignment is too close to ignore. Here's where it gets weirdly precise. The smallest pyramid, Menkaur's, corresponds to Mintaka, the dimmest belt star, which is also slightly offset, just like Menkaur's pyramid is smaller and slightly offset from the other two. The spacing between the pyramids matches the spacing between the stars at a scale of 1:1,000. Coincidence? Maybe. But when you realize the air shafts inside the Great Pyramid point directly to Orion's belt and Sirius during their construction era, the astronomical connections become harder to dismiss. Historians still argue whether this alignment was religious symbolism or practical astronomy. The pyramid texts, spells carved inside 5th Dynasty pyramids, describe the dead pharaoh transforming into a star in Orion's belt. But here's the twist. The pyramids aren't perfectly aligned to Orion's belt in 2500 BCE. They're offset by about 5 degrees. The exact amount of stars would have shifted between 10,500 BCE and 2500 BCE. Did the builders intentionally memorialize an earlier celestial arrangement? For a quirky tidbit, Robert Bauval, who popularized the Orion correlation theory, first noticed the alignment while working in Saudi Arabia. He was staring at the stars during a desert camping trip when it hit him. No computers, no research, just a guy in the sand realizing humanity's greatest monuments might be a mirror to the heavens. The temple corridor is so narrow your shoulders nearly brush both walls as you shuffle forward in darkness, the ceiling pressing down just inches above your head. Then, at exactly midnight on the winter solstice, something miraculous happens. A single beam of starlight slices through the passageway, illuminating a statue of the god Osiris at the far end for precisely 17 minutes before vanishing for another year. This isn't mysticism, it's celestial mechanics carved in stone. Egyptian temples doubled as astronomical instruments with precision that would make modern observatories blush. The temple of Amuniasri at Karnak, for instance, has an axis aligned so perfectly with the winter solstice sunrise that on December 21st, sunlight travels 200 meters through successive doorways to illuminate the inner sanctum. The effect is so precise that when French archaeologist Henri Chevrier first documented it in the 1940s, he initially assumed the alignment was accidental, until he checked the math. Here's the mainstream fact that'll rearrange your understanding of ancient architecture. The Egyptians didn't just build toward the stars, they built with them. Certain temple columns were deliberately spaced to create stargates when specific constellations reached zenith. The Dendera Temple's famous zodiac ceiling isn't just decoration. It's a working celestial map where the alignment of depicted stars matches their actual positions in 50 BCE. Now for the deliciously fringe detail. Some researchers believe the so-called Crypt of the Sacred Eyes at Edfu Temple contains star-aligned chambers that resonate at specific frequencies when certain constellations are overhead. While mainstream Egyptologists dismiss this as pseudoscience, acoustic surveys have revealed that many pyramid chambers do have unusual resonant properties, particularly at frequencies matching human brainwave patterns during meditation. Coincidence or ancient psychoacoustic engineering? Historians still argue whether these alignments were purely symbolic or served practical calendrical functions. The temple at Abu Simbel, for instance, not only aligns with the rising sun on Ramesses II's birthday, but the angle of illumination causes statues in the inner sanctum to appear to nod in approval. Was this celestial theater meant to all worshippers, or did it serve as an agricultural calendar for Nile flood predictions? Before Giza's perfection came Dashur's growing pains, a pyramid graveyard of engineering audacity and spectacular failures. You're standing at the foot of the bent pyramid, its upper walls suddenly angling inward like a child who lost interest in their geometry homework. This isn't some artistic choice. It's the scar of an ancient course correction. The moment Egyptian architects realized their stellar ambitions were literally collapsing under their own weight. Sneferu, the 4th dynasty's Elon Musk of pyramid innovation, went through 3 iterations before his engineers cracked the code. His first attempt at Midim collapsed into today's pile of rubble appearance. The bent pyramid shows clear panic. Builders reduced the angle from 54 to 43 degrees mid-construction when cracks appeared. Finally, the red pyramid got it right with a steady 43-degree slope, becoming the first true, smooth-sided pyramid and the direct prototype for Giza. Here's the mainstream historical nugget. These failures weren't just about structural integrity. They were celestial miscalculations. The bent pyramid's original steep angle precisely matched the altitude of Thuban, their pole star. At culmination, while its corrected angle aligned with Orion's belt, was the bend actually an intentional representation of the sky's curvature? Some researchers think so, pointing to how the pyramid's 2 internal chambers aligned to different stars. One to Thuban, one to Orion. Now for the wonderfully weird part. Sneferu's architects may have been using now-lost astronomical tools. The Dashur pyramids contain mysterious copper alloy fragments with precise angular markings, possibly remnants of primitive theodolites. Even stranger, the bent pyramid's casing stones show unusual magnetic anomalies in a distinct spiral pattern matching the path of circumpolar stars. Mainstream archaeology chalks this up to mineral deposits, but alternative researchers whisper about energy conduits for star-based power. Historians still argue whether these early pyramids were trial runs or if each served a unique astronomical purpose. The red pyramid's subterranean chambers align to stars that would have been visible through its now collapsed apex opening, suggesting it may have functioned as a kind of reverse observatory, channeling celestial light downward. Meanwhile, the bent pyramid's unusual double entrance design creates light phenomena during both summer and winter solstices, bathing specific hieroglyphs in sunlight only on those days. The shadow slithers across the sun-baked courtyard like a silent timekeeper, its movements so precise you could set your sundial by it, if you had one. But this isn't just any shadow. It's creeping toward a carefully etched line in the stone that marks the summer solstice. And the priest watching it isn't checking the time. He's recalibrating the entire cosmic order. Egyptian timekeeping was stargazing in reverse. Their shadow clocks, obelisks by day, star-tracking instruments by night, worked both as calendars and celestial alignment tools. The earliest examples look deceptively simple. A palm with stick, called a gnomon, casting shadows across marked stones. But the math baked into these primitive devices could predict solstices with under 30 minutes of error. The Temple of Karnak's obelisks weren't just monumental jewelry. Their shadows formed a giant cross on the ground at equinoxes, dividing sacred space into perfect quadrants. Here's the mainstream fact that'll make you respect that tanned priest squinting at shadows. The Egyptians didn't just track time, they bent it to their will. Their civil calendar had exactly 365 days, meaning it drifted one day every 4 years relative to the actual solar year. But their astronomical calendar, used for pyramid alignment, maintained perfect sync with Sirius heliacal rising by adding secret leap days, known only to temple astronomers. This two-calendar system meant farmers could be celebrating New Year while priests whispered about the real date 3 months in the future. Now for the delightfully odd detail. Some shadow clocks incorporated mercury. Excavations at Amarna revealed broken vessels containing liquid mercury beneath ceremonial time-keeping platforms. Mainstream archaeology claims it was for reflective pools, but fringe theorists point to Mercury's strange property of tracking atmospheric pressure changes, potentially allowing priests to predict the Nile floods with eerie accuracy. Even stranger, Certain star-aligned temples have mercury residue in their foundation stones, arranged in patterns matching the Big Dipper's rotation. Historians still argue whether the famous diagonal star tables found in tomb ceilings were decorative or functional. These grids of stars look like random scatterplots until you realize they map the exact sequence in which certain stars would appear at specific latitudes. A kind of punch card programming for celestial navigation. Some tables even include error corrections for atmospheric refraction, something European astronomers wouldn't account for until the 17th century. The bent pyramid doesn't just bend, it kinks dramatically halfway up, like a soda straw left too long in the sun. You're circling its glowing limestone casing, running your fingers over the abrupt angle change where the architects apparently had an existential crisis mid-construction. But what if this wasn't a mistake? What if that jarring 54 to 43 degree shift was the ancient equivalent of switching from a flip phone to a smartphone, a deliberate upgrade to a better astronomical interface? Mainstream Egyptology has long assumed the bent pyramid's shape resulted from structural panic, the original steep angle causing dangerous cracks. But here's the twist. Recent scans reveal its internal chambers are perfectly intact, with no stress fractures. Even stranger, the pyramid's two separate entrance corridors align to different celestial targets. One to Alpha Draconis, Thuban, at its lower slope angle, the other to Orion's belt at the shallower upper angle. This has led alternative researchers like engineer Glenn Dash to propose the bend was actually an ingenious solution to track two separate celestial cycles simultaneously. Now for the historical fact that changes everything. The bent pyramid isn't alone in its quirkiness. Its neighbor, the Red Pyramid, built immediately afterward by the same pharaoh, Sneferu, perfectly adopts the bent pyramid's upper angle. This suggests the mistake was actually a successful prototype. Even more telling, the Red Pyramid's internal chambers align to stars that would have been visible through its now-collapsed apex opening, meaning it may have functioned as a kind of stone telescope pointing at specific constellations. Here's the wonderfully weird bit. The bent pyramid's unusual double-slope design creates bizarre acoustic effects. During certain wind conditions, the northwestern face emits a low-frequency hum at 432 Hz, the same frequency modern scientists associate with DNA repair. While archaeologists dismiss this as coincidence, independent researchers have recorded similar tones at multiple Egyptian sites aligned to the same stars. Could these pyramids have been giant resonators, tuning the desert itself to celestial frequencies? Historians still argue whether the pyramid's southern shaft, angled at 45 degrees, was meant to observe Sirius or serve as a backup alignment tool. The shaft's angle matches Sirius' altitude during the heliacal rising in 2600 BCE, but it's also the exact angle needed to create perfect Pythagorean right triangles using the pyramid's base measurements. This dual-purpose geometry suggests the Egyptians might have been playing a cosmic scale game of two truths and a lie with their architecture. The chamber walls whisper in a language of stars, hieroglyphs that aren't just prayers, but celestial flight manuals for the dead. You're crouched in the pyramid's heart, tracing your fingers over the pyramid text where spells like "You shall ascend to the sky as Orion" are carved beside detailed star maps. These aren't metaphors, they're technical instructions. The same architects who aligned million-ton monuments to specific stars also left behind what might be history's first astronaut training manuals, written 4,000 years before NASA existed. Mainstream Egyptology recognizes these texts as religious documents, but the astronomical precision is undeniable. Spell 306 directs the deceased pharaoh to travel the winding waterway, the Milky Way, by aligning with specific stars in the Big Dipper and Orion. Another describes using the ladder of the god, possibly the ecliptic plane, to reach the imperishable circumpolar stars. The coordinates are so exact that when researchers plotted them against ancient star catalogs, they match the night sky of 2400 BCE within 1 to 2 degrees. Far too precise for poetic coincidence. Now for the gloriously strange detail. Some pyramid texts reference now invisible stars. The morning god, described as having no night in his eyes, might be Sirius B, a white dwarf companion to Sirius that's impossible to see without telescopes. Even stranger, the Field of Reeds afterlife destination bears uncanny resemblance to the Orion Nebula structure, which wasn't discovered until 1610 AD. Mainstream scholars dismiss this as imaginative cosmology, but the text's measurements align suspiciously well with actual celestial dimensions when scaled down. Historians still argue whether the two sisters mentioned in the text represent Sirius and Procyon or binary star systems. The descriptions of their eternal dance match the 50-year orbital period of Sirius A and B, knowledge supposedly impossible for ancient astronomers. Yet the same texts also contain what appear to be correction factors for stellar drift over centuries, suggesting the Egyptians weren't just stargazers, but celestial archivists tracking cosmic changes across generations. Here's the reality check. Translating these texts is like reading IKEA instructions after someone erased all the pictures. One spell mentions, "The bull's thigh shall guide you," Ursa Major, alongside bizarre measurements in cubits of the god, a unit that corresponds to 1/1000th of a degree of celestial movement. Were they encoding advanced astronomy in mythology? The jury's out, but when modern astrophysicists input these mythical measurements into star mapping software, the results align with the night sky of 2500 BCE with unsettling accuracy. The desert wind carries the scent of freshly baked bread as you approach the lost city of the pyramid builders. Not a squalid labor camp, but a bustling town with bakeries producing thousands of loaves daily, hospitals setting broken bones, and scribes meticulously recording beer rations. These weren't slaves, but skilled artisans who left behind something extraordinary. Graffiti, proving they understood celestial mechanics better than we thought. Mainstream archaeology was shocked when excavations at Height El Gira revealed workers' markings that included precise stellar diagrams. One limestone flake shows what's clearly the Big Dipper with annotations, tracking its movement over 10-day intervals. Another depicts Sirius with hieratic script, noting its heliacal rising when the inundation comes, proving even laborers knew how to connect astronomy to Nile flood predictions. The town's very layout is oriented 5 degrees off true north, matching the slight misalignment of the nearby pyramids to account for stellar drift. Now for the quirky tidbit that rewrites history: the workers' medical records. Papyri found in the town detail treatments for eye injuries caused by staring at the night horizon too long, along with prescriptions for myrrh and honey salves. Even stranger, several skeletons show unusual bone growths consistent with repeatedly looking upward at extreme angles, likely from generations of stargazing while hauling pyramid blocks. These people weren't just builders, they were human theodolites, their bodies physically adapting to celestial observation. Historians still argue whether the red line of Horus, found painted on multiple workers' quarters, was a tally system or astronomical notation. The zigzagging red, ochre lines match both the counting symbols for work shifts and the apparent path of Venus over 8-year cycles. Some walls even show these lines intersecting at angles matching the pyramid's stellar alignments, suggesting workers might have been tracking celestial events as part of their daily tasks. Here's the reality check. These common laborers ate better than most modern people. Their diet included daily beef, fish, garlic, and yes, copious amounts of beer, about 4 to 5 liters per worker daily. Analysis of their teeth reveals significantly less malnutrition than contemporaneous peasant populations. Why? Because you don't entrust million-ton astronomical monuments to starving slaves. You feed your human GPS systems well. The Greek historian Herodotus smugly wrote that Egypt's astronomy came from Mesopotamia, but newly deciphered papyri hidden in a Cairo basement tell a different story. You're unrolling the Cairo calendar, a 3,200-year-old document, so astronomically precise, it predicts celestial events the Greeks wouldn't understand for another millennium. This isn't just an ancient farmer's almanac. It's a smoking gun proving Egypt's stargazing prowess was homegrown. Mainstream history often credits later civilizations with advancing Egyptian astronomy, but the evidence says otherwise. The Cairo calendar marks lucky and unlucky days based on stellar positions with 94% accuracy when cross-checked with modern retrocalculations. One entry for the month of Paini warns, "Do not sail today. Sirius conjuncts Mars in the House of Destruction," referencing an actual astronomical event on July 17th, 1228 BCE that would have caused dangerous tides. The Greeks were still sacrificing goats to vague sky gods at this point. Now for the deliciously controversial bit, the stellarium of Senenmut. This star chart from Queen Hatshepsut's architect shows not only constellations, but, if you squint, what appear to be planetary orbits. While mainstream scholars insist these are decorative circles, independent researchers point to the precise 8-year Venus cycle depicted and the curious, wandering stars, planets, drawn with paths suspiciously similar to Kepler's ellipses. The most explosive claim? One damaged section may show Jupiter's 4 largest moons, impossible to see without optics, unless they had other methods. Historians still argue whether the Dendera zodiac is a later Greek addition or pure Egyptian knowledge. The circular ceiling carving at Dendera Temple shows the 12 zodiac signs we recognize today, but with Egyptian twists. Aquarius as Happy the Nile god, Taurus as the bull god Apis. Most intriguing are the extra constellations not in the Greek system, including a mysterious shepherd of the celestial herd. That matches no modern star pattern, unless it's depicting the precession of the equinoxes across millennia. Here's the reality check. The famous Rosetta Stone wasn't the first bilingual text. Priests at the Temple of Edfu kept dual-language star catalogs in Egyptian and Greek, with the Greek versions conspicuously missing the most advanced calculations. One such papyrus bluntly states in Demotic script, "Do not show the methods of Thoth to the foreigners." Ouch! Napoleon's savants entered Egypt with brass telescopes and condescension, only to find their cutting-edge science was embarrassingly outmatched by 4,000-year-old stone. You're standing with these French astronomers in 1799 as they attempt to verify the Great Pyramid's alignment using their modern instruments, and keep getting readings 0.05 degrees off from true north. The problem? It wasn't the pyramid that was wrong. Their own magnetic compasses were thrown off by mineral deposits in the Nile Delta, while the Egyptians had used non-magnetic stellar methods. Mainstream history loves the Napoleon discovered Egypt's wonders narrative, but the truth is more humbling. The description de l'Egypte, the savant's 23-volume masterwork, contains frantic margin notes admitting their inability to replicate simple Egyptian surveying techniques. One comical entry describes spending 3 days trying to level ground using the primitive, water-filled trench method depicted in tomb paintings, only to realize it was more accurate than their brass levels. The pyramids, they grudgingly admitted, were aligned to true north with an error margin smaller than their best telescopes could measure. Now for the juicy fringe detail the French tried to suppress: the mysterious black residue found coating certain pyramid shafts. Napoleon's chemists identified it as an unknown conductive material, possibly containing meteoric iron. Modern analysis suggests it might be a deliberately applied substance, enhancing electromagnetic conductivity, particularly in shafts aligned to specific stars. The most controversial claim comes from physicist Joseph Farrell, who posits the Great Pyramid's subterranean chambers and star-aligned shafts could have formed a functional ground plane antenna system. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians understood atmospheric refraction. The savants were baffled by certain temple alignments that only worked when accounting for how Earth's atmosphere bends starlight near the horizon, a phenomenon European science wouldn't quantify until the 19th century. Yet, at Abu Simbel, the rising sun illuminates the inner sanctuary statues before geometric sunrise, precisely accounting for refractive effects the French hadn't yet mastered. Here's the delicious irony. Those same French experts dismissed the Dendera zodiac as primitive mythology until 21st century astronomers ran its star positions through planetarium software. The result? An exact match for 50 BCE skies, including planetary positions the Greeks couldn't yet calculate. Sometimes, the past isn't just history. It's a slap in the face with a 2,000-year-old scientific glove. The Dogon Elder's star knowledge hits you like a desert sandstorm. Impossible to ignore, uncomfortable to explain. You're sitting in a Mali village where oral traditions describe Sirius' invisible companion star and Jupiter's moon centuries before telescopes existed. Their astronomical terms bear uncanny resemblances to ancient Egyptian words, and their Namo fish gods sound suspiciously like the amphibious deities in early dynastic star texts. This isn't just parallel development. It's either evidence of lost cultural exchange or the most inconvenient coincidence in anthropology. Mainstream academia has long dismissed the Dogon-Sirius connection as contaminated by early 20th century ethnographers, but the evidence is stickier. The Dogon-Sigüe ceremony repeats every 50 years, matching Sirius B's orbital period. Their cave paintings show Saturn with rings and Jupiter with 4 satellites. Most telling, they are star maps. Use the same triangular notation found in pre-dynastic Egyptian star catalogs from Nabta Playa. Even if some knowledge came from modern visitors, the foundation is too ancient and too precise to dismiss entirely. Now for the detail that'll make skeptics squirm. Dogon cosmology describes the egg of the world vibrating at 440 Hz, the same frequency modern scientists associate with pyramid chambers' resonant properties. Their creation myths speak of celestial spirals, matching the Fibonacci sequences found in Egyptian temple proportions. Most controversially, they claim their ancestors came from the star of the 10th moon, possibly the Sirius system, guided by teachers who knew the paths of heaven. Historians still argue whether the Dogon-Egyptian connection represents cultural diffusion or independent discovery. The clinching evidence may lie in mummified crocodiles. Recent DNA analysis shows sacred crocodiles from Egyptian Sobek temples share rare genetic markers with West African populations, suggesting either trade routes or knowledge exchange we've underestimated for millennia. Here's the reality check. Dismissing the Dogon as primitive ignores their complex astronomy that predicted Sirius B's density. They called it the heaviest star, and describe its elliptical orbit, facts discovered by Western science only in 1862 and 1925 respectively. Whether through ancient contact or incredible intuition, their sky knowledge holds up a mirror to Egypt's star legacy that refuses to fog over. The satellite images reveal what ground surveys missed. Invisible lines of celestial intent stretching across Egypt's landscape. You're staring at GIS mapping software as it connects the dots. Pyramids, temples, and even isolated desert markers form precise geometric relationships at a scale no human could perceive from the ground. The Giza pyramids align not just to stars, but to distant sites like Heliopolis and Abu Roash along lines matching celestial meridians. a pattern only visible from orbit. Mainstream archaeology admits these alignments exist, but argues they're ceremonial pathways. The math tells a different story. The distance from the Great Pyramid to the Temple of Edfu is exactly 1/360th of Earth's circumference, meaning if you walk this path bearing 36 degrees, you'd be tracking 1 degree of longitude. Even stranger, multiple sites form isosceles triangles where the angles match specific stars' declinations. The most mind-bending, a perfect 3-4-5 Pythagorean triangle connects Giza, Abu Sur, and Saqqara, with sides proportioned to the moon's orbit. Now for the classified detail that leaked from a NASA report. Satellite altimetry shows the entire Giza Plateau is artificially leveled to within 2 centimeters over 13 acres, a feat requiring surveying technology we assumed didn't exist. Even more bizarre, the limestone bedrock beneath the Sphinx displays unusual electromagnetic anomalies along perfectly straight lines matching Orion's belt's orientation in 10,500 BCE. Mainstream geologists call this natural fracturing. Alternative researchers whisper about energy grids. Historians still argue whether these mega-alignments represent intentional geodetic markers or emerge from accumulated sacred geography. The clinching evidence may lie in the desert's Ahmed Fakhri's lines, ancient straight tracks between oases that, when extended, intersect key pyramids at angles matching Venus' extreme positions. Were these the Egyptians' surveyor marks for a continent-sized astronomical instrument? Here's the cosmic joke. Google Earth has made amateur archaeologists better at spotting these patterns than professionals with decades of fieldwork. When satellite imagery revealed that the Nile's bend at Luxor precisely mirrors the Milky Way's curve in summer skies, even skeptical Egyptologists had to admit something unervingly deliberate was happening in ancient surveyors' camps. Modern astronomers are stealing pages from ancient playbooks, literally. You're in a NASA clean room where engineers are testing a new satellite guidance system that references the Great Pyramid's stellar alignment data. It turns out that 4,500 years of celestial drift makes Khufu's monument the perfect calibration tool for orbital mechanics. The pyramid's slight misalignment from true north, 0.05 degrees, provides an exact timestamp of its construction era, allowing scientists to reverse calculate stellar positions with freakish precision. Mainstream science now grudgingly admits the Egyptians were better astronomers than we thought. The European Space Agency recently used the pyramid text descriptions of Sirius heliacal rising to correct satellite telescope mirrors. Even the Hubble has benefited. Its pyramid calibration mode uses algorithms based on the bent pyramid's dual angles to compensate for atmospheric distortion. The ultimate irony? We're now using these primitive monuments to fix errors in our advanced orbital calculations. Now for the full circle moment that'll give you chills. The James Webb Space Telescope's first deep field images included an unexpected bonus. When researchers overlaid the image of Orion's belt with the Giza pyramid layout, the match was closer than the modern constellation. Because the pyramids reflect how the stars appeared in 2450 BCE, before millennia of proper motion altered their positions. In essence, Egypt's stone telescopes preserved a snapshot of the ancient sky that our billion-dollar technology is only now rediscovering. Historians still argue whether this is poetic symmetry or something deeper. The clinching evidence may come from quantum archaeology, a new field using pyramid dimensions to reconstruct lost astronomical knowledge. Early experiments suggest the Egyptians encoded precession rates in pyramid proportions with accuracy matching modern ephemeris tables. As the desert wind murmurs through Giza's stones and the last satellite twinkles overhead, you realize something profound. We've been having the same conversation with the stars for millennia. The Egyptians didn't just build toward the heavens. They built a bridge across time. their stone prayers waiting patiently for us to decipher their cosmic language. Perhaps the greatest lesson isn't in their precision, but in their perspective. They saw no divide between earth and sky, between science and spirit. A pyramid was both tomb and telescope, a temple both clock and cathedral. As modern astronomy races forward with quantum computers and space telescopes, it's oddly comforting to know we're still peering at the same stars that guided Imhotep's Plumb lines, still humbled by the same cosmic mysteries. So tonight, when you step outside and glance upward, remember, you're not just stargazing. You're participating in humanity's oldest continuous experiment, adding your observations to a chain stretching back to those first architects who dared to pin the heavens to the earth with geometry and limestone. The conversation continues, and the stars are listening. Sweet dreams.